In the heart of the dense woods, far from the bustling city life, lies Shadow Pines Resort, a serene haven for those seeking solitude. I'm Alex, the night shift security guard here, and these tranquil nights are what I live for. The stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or a distant owl's hoot, is my companion. My routine is simple yet satisfying. I patrol the grounds, ensuring everything is in order, then settle into the guard shack with its array of monitors. The CTV feeds are my eyes in the dark, watching over the resort like a silent guardian. Guests rarely check in late, but when they do, I'm there to greet them with a smile, hiding my preference for the quiet. Tonight, however, the air feels different. There's a chill that isn't just from the autumn breeze. I shrug it off, attributing it to an overactive imagination fueled by too many horror podcasts. As my shift nears its end, a sudden movement catches my eye on one of the screens. A figure stumbling through the woods, heading straight for the resort. My heart races. This is no ordinary guest. I grab my flashlight and step outside, the beam cutting through the darkness. He emerges from the trees, a man, disheveled and panting. His eyes are wide with fear, and he collapses at my feet, gasping for help. I've seen my share of drunk guests in late night, wanderers, but this is different. There's genuine terror in his eyes. He introduces himself as Michael, his voice trembling. He tells me he's been running for what feels like hours, chased by someone or something. He speaks of a white van, relentless in its pursuit, and how he barely escaped into the woods. I want to dismiss his story as the ramblings of someone out of his mind, but there's an earnestness in his plea that I can't ignore. I help him up, leading him to the safety of the guard shack. My mind races. Should I call the police? Alert the resort management? Before I can decide, a pair of headlights appears at the resort entrance. A vehicle, white and windowless, just like Michael described. It slows down as it nears the guard shack, then drives past. My spine tingles with unease. Something is very wrong. I lock the shack's door, my eyes fixed on the CTV, watching the van disappear into the night. Michael sits in the corner, his body shaking. I realize then that this isn't just another quiet night at Shadow Pines Resort. Something sinister is lurking in the shadows, and we might just be its next victims. The man's heavy breaths echoed in the small confines of the guard shack. "My name's Michael," he gasped, his eyes darting around as if expecting the shadows themselves to leap at him. I offered him a chair and a glass of water, my mind racing with questions. "Someone's after me," Michael stammered, clutching the glass with trembling hands. "I was driving through the woods when my car just died." Then I saw it, a white van, just appearing out of nowhere. His story sounded like something straight out of a horror movie. I wanted to believe he was just another lost soul, maybe a bit too drunk or high. But the fear in his eyes was too real, too raw to dismiss. I glanced at the monitors, expecting to see this mysterious van lurking in the darkness. Nothing but the usual stillness of the resort grounds greeted me. "Did you see who was driving?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Michael shook his head. "No." But they were fast, relentless. I ran into the woods, hoping to lose them. He paused, his gaze falling to the floor. "I think they took my stuff from the car." I reached for the radio, calling in my colleagues. This was beyond my solo night shift duties. We needed to be prepared, just in case Michael's fears were more than paranoia. As we talked, a pair of headlights appeared at the entrance. A vehicle, white and windowless, just like Michael had described. It rolled past the guard shack slowly, ominously, as if surveying the area. My heart skipped a beat. This was no coincidence. The van didn't stop, though. It continued down the road, disappearing into the night. But the sense of dread left behind was palpable. I locked the door, a move more symbolic than truly protective. and turned to Michael. "We need to call the police," I said. But my voice was drowned out by the sudden deafening sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. The quiet night at Shadow Pines Resort had turned into a scene straight out of my darkest nightmares. The van's fleeting appearance had left a chilling silence in its wake. Michael and I exchanged a look of mutual concern. The once comforting confines of the guard shack now felt like a fragile barrier against an unknown menace. Should we go after it? Michael's voice was a mix of fear and eagerness. I hesitated, weighing the risks. The idea of venturing out into the darkness, chasing after a mysterious van, seemed like madness. Yet doing nothing felt just as dangerous. I decided to call my colleagues for backup. As I reached for the radio, the static, filled silence reminded me of our isolation. The resort, usually a haven of peace, now felt eerily deserted. "We need to stay put and call the police," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Michael nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the window, scanning the darkness. I dialed the police, but the reception was poor, the signal struggling to break through the dense woods that surrounded us. The call was brief and frustrating, the dispatcher promising to send a unit, but with no idea when they would arrive. As we waited, the van made its second appearance. This time, it didn't just drive by. It stopped at the edge of the woods, its engine idling ominously. The headlights were off, but the moonlight revealed its sinister silhouette. Michael and I watched in silence, the tension thick in the air. The van was like a predator, watching, waiting. I could feel Michael's fear, his body tensed like a coiled spring, ready to bolt at any moment. Then, without warning, the van lurched forward, its headlights blazing to life, illuminating the shack in a harsh white light. It was charging towards us, fast and relentless. Panic surged through me. "Get down," I shouted, pulling Michael to the floor. We crouched behind the desk, bracing for impact. The van's engine roared louder as it closed in, a metallic beast on a collision course with us. But at the last moment, it swerved away, its tires screeching against the gravel. The van sped off into the night, leaving us in stunned silence, our hearts pounding in our chests. The threat was gone, for now, but the fear remained. We were no longer just guards at a quiet resort. We were survivors, clinging to the fragile safety of our shelter, waiting for the dawn to break the night's terror. The aftermath of the van's sudden charge left us in a state of shock. The guard shack, once a sanctuary, now felt like a fragile shell, vulnerable to the horrors lurking outside. Michael and I exchanged glances, our unspoken fear palpable in the tense air. "We need to defend ourselves," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Scouring the shack, we gathered whatever we could use as weapons: a heavy flashlight, a fire extinguisher, and a few tools from the maintenance kit. Primitive, but it was all we had. The silence was oppressive, broken only by our shallow breaths and the distant sound of the wind through the trees. Every creak and rustle sent a jolt of fear through me. We were sitting ducks, waiting for the predator to return. And return it did. We braced ourselves, gripping our makeshift weapons tightly. But instead of attacking, the van just sat there, as if taunting us. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The psychological torment was almost worse than an outright assault. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the van reversed and sped off into the night. We were left in bewildered relief, our hearts racing, our bodies trembling with adrenaline. The sound of sirens in the distance signaled the arrival of the police. But by the time they reached us, the van and Michael were nowhere to be seen. The officers took our statements, their skepticism evident. To them, it was just another strange night at a remote resort. But for us, it was a brush with something unexplainable, something terrifyingly real. As the police left, promising to patrol the area, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The van was still out there, its driver's intentions unknown. The resort, once a place of peace, now felt tainted by the shadow of fear. I knew one thing for sure. The night was far from over. The dawn broke with an eerie calm, the night's terror still lingering in the air. The police had left, their investigation yielding more questions than answers. The resort management, more concerned about their reputation, downplayed the incident, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. I walked through the resort grounds, the familiar paths now tainted with a sense of unease. The van was gone, but its presence was still felt, like a dark shadow hanging over shadow pines. Michael's disappearance added to the mystery. Was he a victim, or was there more to his story? The day passed in a blur, my mind replaying the events of the night, the fear, the adrenaline, the sound of the van's engine. It all felt like a nightmare, yet disturbingly real. I struggled to make sense of it, the rational part of my brain wrestling with the fear that something unexplainable had happened. As night fell again, I found myself back in the guard shack, the memories of the previous night haunting me. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a lurking danger. The resort's serene beauty had turned into a deceptive facade, hiding the horrors of the night. Then, it happened. In the distance, the faint sound of an engine. My heart raced as I peered into the darkness. There, emerging from the shadows, was the white van. It was back. I felt a chill run down my spine. The van stopped at the edge of the woods, its engine idling. I couldn't see the driver, but I could feel their gaze on me, cold and calculating. The van was a predator, and I was its prey. I knew I had to act. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped out of the shack, determined to confront whatever horror lay within that van. As I approached, the van's engine revved, a warning or a challenge. I couldn't tell. Then, without warning, the van sped off into the night, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. I was left standing in the darkness, my heart pounding, my mind racing.